Shola. We're going to call their names up, and then we're going to introduce them properly when they sit down. Okay. Mr. Eddie Shola, welcome to the stage. Mr. Oscar Michael. Feel free. Mr. Ukeme Okuku. Is that what you're hiding? Gamers don't die. I love that shirt. I want one. This is not a partial introduction, but a very, very personal friend of mine, Mr. Hugo Obi. I call him my mentor. And a definite powerhouse in gaming, another mentor of mine, Mrs. Bukola Akingbade. Okay. How's everybody doing today? Everybody fine? All right. Welcome, everyone. It is the AFRIF, the Africa International Film Festival 2023, the 12th edition, and today we are representing the world's most powerful community, which is the gaming community, and we're going to be talking about cultural representation in video gaming. Before we begin, I'd like to just start maybe at the end over there, Mr. Hugo B, if you could just give the audience a brief introduction, and we'll work our way down this way of who you are and what you do so they understand the powerhouse that you are.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be here to talk about gaming at AFRIF. So I run a studio called Malio Games. We make mobile games. Specifically, we make African-inspired mobile games. We've been around for 11 years now. And we're a team of 35 creators across 5 African countries. We are pretty much in the business of gaming. In addition to building games, we also run a training program for game developers called Game Up Africa that started in 2021. And that has really helped provide a pipeline of talents into the games industry. And I'm also a very big advocate for the games industry, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa as a whole. I sit on the board, on the advisory board for Africa Games Week, which is the biggest gaming conference that takes place in Cape Town every year, B2B. I'm also, myself and my team are currently working on the first Africa-focused report on the video games industry. So the state of the Africa Games, the state of the Africa Games industry, which will come out in about 2 weeks, just before Africa Games Week. And we were also, very keen on working with the government to kind of like mainstream gaming here in Nigeria, and we're seeing great strides coming out of that. So that's me.
Thank you, Hugo.
Yes, my name is Michael Oscar. I'm the founder of Africa Communicate. And Africa Communicate is a launchpad for stakeholders in the African video games, immersive and interactive media industry. So we're looking at video games, animation, comics, and extended reality. And our main focus is to grow the business side of the industry. There's been lots of game studios over the years struggling to monetize and grow, studios coming and closing within a decade. And so we focus on the business side, and we do this by showcasing the works of the creators, the industry stakeholders in the space, as well as connecting them to opportunities for jobs, funding, learning, exchange programs, co-production, and more. And currently our community is spread across 15 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And we mainly work on that business side because, as he said, the games industry is one of the biggest industries. It's worth billions of dollars, and how can we become creators in the space, not just consumers? That's what we're focused on. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ukeme Okuku. I'm the head hype man at Gamic. We are a community chat app for gamers and Web3 enthusiasts. Our focus in Africa is mostly on gaming community. As I mentioned, we're a community chat app. We are trying to see how we could create a bigger community in Africa, bring the gamers together, and help support them grow their ecosystem. We actually do this by sponsoring events, supporting smaller communities, and also educating them and sharing ideas on how they could actually scale their community. Because we believe that with bigger community, we are going to be able to attract more funding into the gaming space and also attract more gaming companies, the African gaming space more seriously. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Edu Shola. I'm a game developer, animator, and designer based here in Lagos, Nigeria. I run Deluxe Creation Studios, so I'm the founder and the creative director. And Deluxe Creation Studios, we started off as an animation company back then in 2009, and we've been able to focus more on games ever since 2014 when we made our first game Approach. And since then, we've published over 25 games on Google Play Store and the App Store. And currently now we're trying to focus more on making console games so that we can actually reach more audience and make games that connect more people, in the sense that we're trying to make more multiplayer games. Currently we're working on 2 PC and console titles, which is Urban Fury and Adventures of Chike Lost in Meta. So yeah, that's why I'm here. Thank you for having me.
Hi everyone, my name is Bukola Akingbade. I'm the founder and CEO of Kucheza Gaming. Kucheza is a Swahili word that means to play, and we have a vision that video games can be used for youth development and empowerment. And we do this through our games in education program on the one hand, where we, I suppose, insert ourselves in mostly public schools, a few private schools, to try to get game development in the schools and computing as an actual course, because it's not in our curriculum. Last year, we trained 10,000 students in Lagos State. This year, we are on course to train 25,000. On the other side of our business, we have our studio where we make our own games, but also support the community by doing Unreal Engine training to build capacity to do, I suppose, quality work for the industry. Thank you.
These are amazing panelists, and my own side of the business is to take all the games that they've developed and turn it into esports titles so we can have players competing and earning, a living from gaming and becoming esports athletes. So without them, my business, we struggle small. So talking about cultural representation in gaming, I'm going to start with Hugo again, because you're my guy. I'll ask you, how important is cultural representation in video games, and why should developers consider it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for a studio like ours, from the get-go, we saw an opportunity to create games for the African market. The way we thought about it at the time was, we have a huge consumer market, as everyone knows. We've seen success with Nollywood and Afrobeats, demonstrating the fact that consumers will behave differently if you present to them a different genre of content. We knew that the games industry was exploding, and it continued to grow. We recognized the fact that Africa wasn't a key player within the global gaming space. And there was a theory in my head that if we were able to create content that could resonate with audiences here, that we might see different behaviors. So just to give you an example, we have a game called What's King, which is based on the popular What's card game. And we built that in 2020. We released that in 2020. And that game is targeted at audiences predominantly in Nigeria. 90% of our players come from Nigeria, for instance. We're currently working on a cooking game that is based on jollof rice. And that for us is taking the popular genre of cooking and applying it to something that we can all relate with. And in an instance like that, in an instance like that, we would expect that we could do more targeted marketing and distribution, but our audience can relate with the kind of food that is being produced, the environment, the characters, the kind of nuance, the music, the fashion. There's a lot that they can relate with. And games are distributed via phones, via PCs, via consoles. We are focused on the kind of mobile segment, so the mobile phone devices. which everybody has a handle of, and the interaction that they can have, the satisfaction that people derive from playing games should be universal. So when we think about the global games industry as well, games are a lot about storytelling and applying stories to an interactive media form. And those stories at the moment are being told with a lot of like Western culture. So if you look at, say, for instance, if you look at like first-person shooter games, you know, like it's based on American culture where shooting is part of their daily life. Not in a bad way, right? Not in a bad way, but you know, it's their First Amendment right. And this is something that they can relate with. So, you know, when first-person shooter games were generated, you know, the Americans could connect with it because that is part of their culture. For us, it's a little bit foreign, right? But there might be other things that we could relate with that could be applied to games that we can connect with. And that can also be a form of cultural export. So it's leveraging the kind of like talent, skills, stories that are close to us, applying that in a professional form, making it available within a global platform. Obviously starting from home and then building abroad. Because if you look at Nollywood and you look at Afrobeats, you know, like when those music are being created or when those films are being created, they're not necessarily thinking about audiences in Europe and audiences in America. That is a natural byproduct of the success that they have through the audiences that they have here. So that cultural export, I think, is a good opportunity, and gaming is a new medium that we need to start investing and continue investing in. We've already started investing in it, but we need to continue investing and growing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Bukola, I have a question. Like, when we think about, you know, putting cultural representation into our games, you know, you are involved in training for game development, but I do know that your studio is also developing some very, very culturally indigenous titles that tell a story about our African mythology and things like that. How difficult it is, maybe from a development side and even from a content creation side, is it to infuse these cultural stories into the game development and storytelling in gaming?
Wow, I think that's a multi-layered question. I'll start by saying, at the back, just off of the back of that question, that the video games industry, just for everybody, has, like most industries, different career pathways, as an example. So a few years ago, actually, we were on the same panel then, where it just struck me because a lot of game developers were speaking and we're talking about games they were developing with other game developers, not really extending to, you know, to talk to a professor of this or someone who's actually a specialist in whatever field they're trying to create games in. And it struck me that, you know, when we get to the point that we need to create a game, we have to involve people from other industries and who have that information, because it's not easy to try to talk about Yoruba mythology. Where do you want to start? There's so many schools of thought, by the way, and in so many different. Shango is not the same everywhere that you read it. It's not the same thing, you know. And if you say Shango, and you know who really owns Shango, so to speak. And there's a lot more even Afro-Brazilian influences and Caribbean influences when you get into Yoruba mythology. So it was quite important for us to license a book that existed. They had done about 20 odd years of work in that space, and to be able to collaborate with them as writers and as historians to give us, you know, relative safety in terms of the character story narratives. And so for us, that was kind of the angle we went in. And if you kind of look at a game, and this is my huge reference for culture in video games, is Assassin's Creed, right? If you don't play Assassin's Creed, try. It's huge because it's set in different locations, and what they found out eventually was, though people were playing the game, they got to learn a lot about ancient Egypt, about the Nordics, about just different things, and it was the unintentional consequence of running that game. So it then led them to create something called the Discovery Series, which they now use in education as an example, where when you're studying history, through the game, with everything they had invested in the game, they're able to do that in education. So I do think that for us, for anybody who is trying to do anything that has cultural representation, you have to talk to professionals. Like if you kind of look at the people behind Assassin's Creed, you see archaeologists. You're like, where do I want to start here? Like, you literally have to kind of maybe go to Unilag or somewhere and talk to professors. It would be really useful anyway, is what I would say.
So that's from the content side. Obviously, making sure that the stories are written properly with enough research and enough background. And I think this expands to other industries in Nigeria as well. But then again, I just want to ask, from the development side, you know, sometimes I feel like some of these game engines and stuff, they get biased for, they don't have some things, maybe I might be wrong, that assist you in creating these elements that are unique to our culture. Is that a difficulty, or are there resources that make it easy, or is it seamless to put like a dashiki or, you know, kente inside the game without it being, or cutlass, or, you know, our African dagger? Is it easy to create those things inside the game so that those instruments that are unique to our culture are easy to do?
Should I take that? Oh, yeah, no, I think, look, to the point of, you know, supporting creators, we just have to keep training creators, letting them know they should start developing for like asset libraries and things that are open sourced, or things that people can, you know, have them as assets to do or to use in their games. So I think the more we educate, the more those things will be populated. There's a global campaign done by Orange, I think, that they had from 4 different cultures across the continent. And they created all these characters and made them public and put them in different games. We need more of those kinds of things to encourage creators to see that it is possible to, you know, design like we do in our fashion or in our music, and put them in public spaces where other people can use in games for their own games. So I think, to be honest, I think the tools are there. We just need, like we're doing now, to get more people making content that other people can use.
Awesome. Shola, I have a question for you. So when we look at cultural representation in gaming, there are a few games globally that have tapped into Africa. We have some African characters. We have some Nigerian characters. For instance, I think Smite has Yemoja and Olorun. Apex Legends has a Nigerian character called Seer. When we look at the way international studios have, you know, plugged in and come and tapped into our culture, because sometimes, would you say there has been misrepresentation, or do you think they've done enough research? Because sometimes when people come and they don't really tap into the source or do enough research. What's your take on the current representation of African culture in the gaming industry globally?
Yeah, I think so far, I'll start with the new Spider-Man game. Like, we've seen like the effort that they've made in making it come close as possible. Like, okay, this is what a black person should look like. This is what a hair should look like. But in terms of misrepresentation, yeah, of course, because even we here can't be represented. Like she said, if you don't get the actual facts and data right, you can actually misrepresent it. So I think so far, we just need to applaud the effort so far. But nobody can tell our stories or create assets like us. So we have to, like she said, we have to just encourage more people to create things that would make it easier to have more African content in games. Like, for instance, when I was working on a music video in 2021, I realized that I went online, I couldn't find any 3D model of Lekki Koyi Bridge, and I needed to make it fast. So what I ended up doing was making it myself, and I intend to like push it further and get more people to like, okay, let's start a campaign around, let's just make these models, like different structures. I remember I made the Three Wise Men as well. I made also an Ayo statue, but it's not out in public yet, but it's something that should be like a campaign, so we can get more people to make models like that, so people can easily go online and make and get things like that easily. So we just need to encourage ourselves, and we need to, because representation, we can't get it right 100%, because even the person that is going to give you the references, it's also coming from a third party, you understand? So even an archaeologist will still interpret it the way they understand it, so yeah. So representation cannot be 100%, but at least we can get closer. Yeah.
So, Mukeme, the question I have for you is, what challenges would we be facing to be able to accurately, you know, represent our culture, you know, in in video gaming? Are there any challenges that you face, or are there any things that you feel would be the next steps to make these things easier? Maybe not just from a local, but also exporting our culture to the world. Because I think video games are a good vehicle to do that. But are there any difficulties or challenges we face in industry right now that make it difficult for you to do that?
Yeah, I think video game by default is a very good tool for education. Like he has pointed out, on the technical side, there are difficulties. So for example, getting those assets. And I think the difficulty there would be in the funding part. So we need more liquidity, you could put it that way. We need more funding in that space, just on creating the assets. Because if we have about 20,000 3D artists creating assets around African culture, around Nigerian culture, when the video game developers are actually out there searching for this asset, they will see it. But imagine there is one person in a studio making an argument to represent maybe Nigeria in their game, and they want to go get the asset and they can't find the asset. First, you have to convince the company to also allocate resources into creating those assets. And when it's just one person, it becomes very difficult. So it's very easy to shut down. So we, on our own side, we have to play our part in putting in more funding towards creating this asset so that video game developers can easily get access to it. And then on the educational part, we need to train more people who can make this asset. Education is a very difficult thing when you come to the context of Africa and Nigeria that we have to solve. Because I feel the more we solve that, the easier it's going to be for us to achieve a lot. I started my career in gaming. Not professionally. As you know, we usually frequent a lot of gaming centers. But gaming introduced me to tech. And from there, I was able to build a career for myself. Gaming would introduce a lot of people to animation, game design, 3D modeling. And the more people we have in these spaces, the more people are going to contribute to this space. I got my skills in tech, and I decided to contribute into the Nigerian gaming space. He got his own skill, he decided to contribute. So if we have 1 million, 2 million, 10 million people who actually have the skill set, and we have just 10% putting 100% of their resources towards the space, that is a huge achievement. So I think on the local level, we need to put a lot of funding towards the gaming space, and then we also need to do a lot in the educational part. On the international, I think it's going to still fall back to the local side. Because whatever we do, look, using Afrobeat, for example, we had the likes of Two-Face, Wizkid, and yourself, and Don Jazzy, creating music in Nigeria for the Nigerian audience. And we're able to do something and make something of it. And then the international audience started paying attention. So if we're able to come together and create something of our gaming space, the international markets will start paying attention. Between last year and this year, I've probably spoken to over 200 gaming studios internationally. And whenever they come, they look at Nigeria as a consumer market. And they don't really have even a strategy for Nigeria. One of them shared their pitch deck to me, and I was looking, and I saw Latin America, Asia, Europe, and I didn't see Africa. I was like, why are you talking to me when you don't even have Africa in your deck? But they just see us, okay, whatever you have, just throw it in there and people will consume. But until we start consuming our own content, and the only way they can break into our market is by trying to replicate what we are doing, that's where we are going to be able to break into the international market.
It's awesome, and that leads me to my question for you, Oscar. Now, what you do it covers a lot of angles, you know, from animation to art to gaming. And he was just talking about how, you know, if we don't build this ecosystem and consolidate it with our content and with our own methods and things that we're doing, we wouldn't be loud enough. You've used music. I can also say the same for Nollywood and film, of how we've done something great. And I think globally, we do know that the video games market makes more revenue than the film and music combined. So in that sense, it's a shocker as to why, you know, in Africa and Nigeria especially, we're not paying more attention to that field, because the employment opportunities when it comes to game development alone are unbelievable. You have designers, you have musicians, you have, you know, artists, you have, you know, artists, 3D renderers. There's so many jobs that can be created from having a thriving video game industry. Now, in your opinion, are there any things that you would say you would call progress so far in the video games industry, especially looking at cultural representation? And then what would you say we need to do to take it to the next level?
Yeah, thanks for that. So the first thing I'll start with that is huge progress is I'll reference a report or article that just came out recently. The world is becoming more African. That is the best thing that has happened to us. Because what that means is there is a higher demand for our content. The world globally is tired of the same kind of content they are used to. And then we have more Africans out there in the diaspora. We have more Africans on the continent with higher spending power. So the truth is there is a huge opportunity for us to tap into. And as you can see, in the animation side, Disney came out with Kizazimoto, and there are many more animations in the work promoting African culture, especially since Black Panther went mainstream and all. So there's an opportunity, there is a market. One thing stakeholders need to realize is as at now, as at today, the market is bigger outside Africa than on the continent. But then another bigger opportunity is there are pathways for collaboration, which means you can build locally for the global market and monetize easily than ever before. That has been one of the biggest problems than ever before. So the huge opportunity there is an opportunity for us all. What we need to do now is create structure and systems. We need to put those things in place so that when stakeholders outside the continent are coming to us, we are not the ones begging. Yeah, because we have what they want. And I think Pierre was in Nigeria last month, September. That's the head of 343 Studios. He's a Nigerian, he works with the Xbox studio. And what he said was, in the nearest future, we have the youngest youth population and it's growing, right? And everyone out there, their 20, 30, 40-year strategy is how they can own the African market. But every stakeholder today is how they can go outside the market and sell. So that's a problem. We need to create our own systems. We need to create our own structure. If you look at the Asian market, the games from the West, when they are selling to that market, they do what they call localization, right? If they are creating a character, it must look a certain way. If there's any form of sexual representation, you know that if you're taking it to them, they say no. Is anything like that done to us Africans? No. Because just as he said, they know that whatever they give to us, we would accept. And the people who are meant to protect us are also eager for that money, that exchange of finances, that we are not thinking long term. So there is a big opportunity. That's why I'm still in this industry. Yes, there's a huge opportunity, but what we need to focus on is creating systems and structures that protect our creators, that protect ourselves, that protect our generation. Because Africa is the next frontier, and this is where the money will be coming from in the next 20, 30 years.
Wow, that is, Africa is the future. Africa is now. Hugo, I'm going to come back to you on a development question. You know, because sometimes when you're creating games, how do you strike a balance between, you know, making sure that the game has a strong level of cultural representation, but also remains enjoyable to the consumer at the same time? Because, you know, sometimes you don't want to say because you're African or Nigerian, you must force it in and the person can't, you know, really relate or appreciate the game. How do you handle that with your team when you're creating games?
No, thanks for asking that question. So, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a team of around 35 people across 5 African countries, so we're like a fully remote company. In that slice, we have around 18 people who are engineers. Then we have designers, we have game designers, we have narrative designers, we have artists, 2D, 3D character, environment artists. We have an analytics team. We have people who do marketing. But the core development, so back in 2022, we designed something called a rapid prototyping model, just to enable us to have a streamlined process for creating games. And if anybody's interested in learning about the rapid prototyping model that we have a blog on our website that breaks it down. But the purpose of the rapid prototyping was to enable 2 engineers 6 weeks to develop a game. It's prototype games, and the journey for creating games starts with prototypes. You have to build something that is testable, playable. You put it in the hands of users, you get feedback, and then you iterate. So it's a really iterative process. You don't sit down in your bedroom for 2 years building something and assuming that people are going to enjoy it. You need to put it in the hands of people and see how they respond to it, and then evolve from that. So we have standardized to a certain degree a framework around building games that really, allows the teams to work in an autonomous way. And that framework includes a couple of rules that you have to abide by when you're making decisions on what games to build. So one of those rules is that it can be built by 2 engineers over a 6-week period. So when you're conceptualizing your ideas, you have to ask yourself, do I and my teammate have the skills required to deploy this game within 6 weeks? If the answer is no, then you make a different decision. And in some cases, if the answer is no, then you change the scope of that project. So you reduce the scope to what's achievable within that time frame. We are a studio that focuses on African-inspired games, so the game has to have an African element to it. So how do you incorporate that? Is that through your character development? Is that through your narrative, your story? Is that through the actual game itself? So I mentioned What, which is an Africa-focused game. I mentioned the cooking game, which is a classic game but based on African food. So that's another framework that we use. Obviously, mobile is a platform, so it has to be a mobile game. So those types of processes and systems really guide people to make decisions. Obviously, our teams are remote, so you could have one guy in Nigeria working with a guy in Kenya. In Nairobi, you can have a guy in Cameroon working with a person in Accra, or a guy in Johannesburg working with a person in Cameroon and Nigeria, depending on the project. And then we go through the rapid prototyping for 6 weeks. At the end of that 6-week sprint, every team is required to deploy or deliver a playable prototype. That includes 4 basic things. So it has to have a core gameplay loop, so like a core mechanic, like this is what I'm doing. It has to have a very clear first-time user experience, so you have to think about the fact that most people are not in your head. They don't know how you design the game. So they need to be able to systematically navigate through your game through a set of instructions that you've designed into the game. It has to have an economy system, so there has to be a reason why I'm playing the game. And then more importantly, it has to be fun, so I have to enjoy it. And that is kind of like the checklist. So at the end of 4 weeks, we go through the games. It could be 4 teams simultaneously working on a rapid prototyping, so different games. Somebody can be doing a runner, a racer, a card game, like a world-building game, whatever. We play through all of those, and then we go through that checklist of which of the games have all of these 4 things, which one is fun, used sort of like a producer to help refine that kind of core game that they've built. We spend another month in the refinement phase, so we'll narrow it down from the 4 games to maybe 2 or maybe 1 game. We'll put more developers on that project. When they're done with the refinement, we introduce analytics, and then we get that game released.
Wow.
Our first phase of release. And the first phase of release is just to put it in the hands of players, get feedback, understand what players are doing within the game, and then see if it's sticky or not.
So, guys, you see, when you're holding Candy Crush or What King in your hand and you're just pressing, the process it takes to build something like that is amazing, and the amount of people that get involved in that process is unbelievable. Now, we're talking about cultural representation in gaming and video gaming, and for me, one of the things that I am very proud of is, as a filmmaker and also as a gamer at the same time, is the ability to create perception, right? Nigeria is a very, Africa as a whole is a very diverse. There's so many different cultures. Nigeria alone is like a continent in itself, and I'm going to ask Ukeme this question. How can we use, is it possible to use, gaming to create a perception of maybe a more unified perception? How can we use gaming to affect the perception amongst ourselves as a culture and as a people in Africa?
Yeah. Like I previously mentioned, gaming can be a tool for education. A lot of young Nigerians know very little about their history. And just like she mentioned, just integrating some of the African stories, African tradition, African art into games can actually educate a lot of these young gamers. And if you're on Twitter a lot, if you're online a lot, and you see a lot of the back and forth between individuals, maybe of ethnicity or religion, a lot of those things are rooted in the fact that they don't really understand their point of view. People fight most especially when they don't have the full information. Because if they understand how related we are, either Yoruba, Igbo, how we used to trade with each other before, I don't want to bring the colonial masters into this. People really understand their heritage and how we used to interact with each other. A lot of grievance exchanges online wouldn't happen. So gaming actually has the opportunity to change that. Because if I understand how I'm Ibom, then if I understand how people used to interact with the Igbo people, as you know, Akwa Ibom is bordered by Abia State, River State. So we used to do a lot of trades back in the days. If I understand that, I would not have an issue with an Igbo person. I wouldn't have an issue with someone from River State because I understand that historical connection between the two of us. I wouldn't even go down to the Yorubas, even down to Ghana. We have people in some part of Ghana that bear names that are very similar to Akwa Ibomite. And a lot of us don't understand the historical context at which we are connected. So gaming actually provide that opportunity. As mentioned of Assassin's Creed, imagine playing a game and going through the Benin Kingdom in the early days. You would learn a lot from just playing those games. And a lot of us are visual learners. A lot of people learn from actually doing, not from reading. So I actually see where representation in game can actually help educate us and also bring that understanding of individuals into play.
See, they have said it all. We can stop wars. We can bring Nigeria together as a country and Africa together as a continent as a whole with storytelling through gaming. And the beauty about it also is that gaming has really no age limit. And apart from some titles which have certain age restrictions, but you can be a gamer from as young as 5 years old or even younger, all the way till you die. So it's the most, in my opinion, the most viable vehicle to pass information, to educate, to unify, and to connect people around the world. And I'm happy to be on this panel with some of these amazing people. And I'm going to ask some, personal questions, not personal questions, but questions focused on what your projects you're working now. So if we have an idea of some of the things you're working on now that sort of help to push the narrative of cultural representation. And Bukola, I'm going to start with you. I know you have a project that I really would love for you to share with the audience today so that they understand what you're building. Is it Abi, you can't tell us?
Okay, so it's even on, it's released actually, the alpha is out and it's in testing. So that's the Wild Kingdoms Iton Orisha is part 1. It's only available at the moment on the Google Play Store. Just for testing actually and for feedback. It's literally like 6 missions about King Alantaku and his journey. But the idea is kind of like a God of War situation where you go through story arcs to get to understand that Orishas exist and what that means to the Yoruba kingdom. But I think just personally actually I would like to mention, well, 2 things. So one is that with video games, I think it's extremely important from a cultural perspective to really understand that, what radio was to some generations or TV is to another generation, games are to our kids. And if you have anyone under the age of 18, 22, 10, you have there's no other language. That and maybe Naruto, maybe, it's huge, and that's hugely significant because if all the time you spend in entertainment is spent playing a game, right? That medium must be transformed into something that, one, is hugely fun, which is the number one reason people play games. Don't give me a boring game and say it's about culture. So it needs to be fun, but it needs to also infuse certain elements. And so for the first thing, like I said, is just realize that the video games medium is almost like saying you lose a generation as a continent if we don't play in this space. It's as simple as that. You know, we'll lose them to Genshin Impact, which is a great game, by the way. You lose them to Roblox, which is also a great platform, by the way. But it's just that's where they will be. And those are the influences that they will have. You know, I remember the first time there was an integration on Fortnite, music integration, because Fortnite is 12 plus. They introduced Travis Scott integration. And at that point, I had to ask myself, do I really want my 12-year-old, you know, having this, like, and it's true, because you're not in control of that narrative, and, you know, you could say, don't play it. But the other side is also you could actually get more active and more proactive and start infusing elements of our culture even in mainstream games, which is another project we are like on the verge of doing, being able to do content for, like Oscar mentioned, for larger studios as well. Last but not least, just from a culture perspective, you touched on something around social gaming, and I'm going to talk about the gaming culture now, because video games bring us a lot more closer together. It's as simple as that. Some of us, we have family or friends or people we haven't ever met that we play with online when we do. And it's a huge, for a lot of people, COVID, post-COVID, is a huge way to keep in touch with, you know, your loved ones and stuff like that. So gaming is no longer, you know, in one place doing it by myself. There's actually a culture, a social culture and community around video games that, you know, we need to pay attention to as well.
Awesome. We're going to be taking questions very quickly, but that's when you come to Edu Shola. Do you have anything that you can, you know, tell us that you're working on, or what's happening in the space, especially when it comes to cultural representation?
Yeah, so the whole shifts for me started off when I made Adventures of Chike in 2017. Before then, I always made a lot of geeky games. Like, I made App Rush, like games that you would look at. Like, so when I made Chike, I just wanted to make a game that people would look at and they can relate to that character, because I wanted to make a character that would be beloved to the people, and people would understand, like, okay, the struggles that this character goes through, like a typical Nigerian. Like Chike, for instance, you can say is inspired by Dexter, you know, Dexter's Lab. So you'd say Dexter has a lab in his house, but Chike, before he can make any invention, he has to like use scraps and everything as scavenged for different parts to make it. He has to use unconventional ways to make things happen, and that's our reality here. Like, most entrepreneurs they go through a lot more different loops and hoops to make things happen here. But so I wanted to like picture that, and so Chike is a character that when you see the struggles, the story around this character, you would say, okay, I've been through something like this before. Like, you wanted to make a solar panel. Let me not say too much, but he wanted to make a solar panel. He went through different other means to make it happen. So I wanted to like portray something like that, and even from his dressing, his name, for instance, you know, start with the names, right? The name is Chike, and you know we can relate to that's a Nigerian name, he's African. Then even from the dressing, he's always wearing Ankara shorts, and that's also meshed with a T-shirt. Of course, that can be accepted anywhere in the world. But the idea is to always infuse it and merge it, so like kind of merge it together, like a synergy between different cultures, and to make it more acceptable and like globally. So yeah, that's Chike is one, but mostly the world around Chike is started off in Lagos, so we built Lekki Koi Bridge. We recently built the Dumota, the market, yeah, that Enyiga, yeah. So that Enyeyo, is that what they call it? Yeah, that place that you have the statue. So we built that as well, and we recently looked at it and we're trying to improve on it. So basically, we are just trying to build things that people can relate to, it characters that people can see and they can feel like, okay, I look like this person looks like me. And so for our fighting game that we're building, and that started off about 2-3 years ago when we started working on. David Kimekwe was working on it. Then I saw it. I was like, this, because it made it like a manga fighting game, and I felt like this is an opportunity for you to like get closer to people, because prior to that time, I worked with Ale Akdogan to make Throne of Gods, but I didn't finish the project with them, so I just did some bits. And I can remember how much research Ali did to make the gods. Like, he went to different people, even different countries in Africa, like speaking to different people there, and he was asking them about their gods, and he tried his best to make them look as close as possible. So those for our fighting game, what we try to do now, since it's not set in the olden days, it's set in the modern age. So we are trying to, like, okay, from the fashion, for instance, like one of the characters is wearing this popular Igbo, you know, that stripes that has lion.
No Gen Z outfits.
Of course, that
with
Gen
the baggy
Z outfits.
pants, you know, you have to get the baggy pants in there.
So we are trying to like do as much as we can. So not necessarily looking like epic African, but like it can be modern, but it can still be African. Like, you understand? Like my fit right now is not Agbada, but it's, you understand, right? So basically, that's what we are trying to do. We want to create characters.
Now I'm looking at my feet. I should have worn native.
You lost that opportunity. so we're trying to create characters. We're trying to create beloved worlds that people can feel like they belong to. But that doesn't necessarily have to be like what it looks like in the real world. Like Chike Lost in Meta, for instance, is just a metaverse version of Lagos. You understand? Then we're also trying to infuse other locations around the world inside of those things. So the cultural representation doesn't have to end in Africa. It can take other cultures as well and blend it in.
Amazing, amazing. One of the things I'm waiting for is for us to have Nigeria in the flight simulator. I think Microsoft Xbox has a flight simulator, and they have different builds for different countries around the world. It would be nice to take off from Murtala Mohammed International Airport and fly to Abuja and just, do things like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've started late, but we're moving on time, and I want to create an opportunity for questions. But just to summarize what we've all spoken about, the video gaming industry is massive. It's huge. It's highly underrated on the African continent, in Nigeria especially. There are lots of players in this space that are doing big things and trying to push the envelope and get Nigeria and Africa on the global match, and require a lot of support. And all the players in this industry are very, very conscious of the fact that it has to be Nigerian and African first. We're not confused where we come from, and our ideology and our plan is to take Africa and Nigeria to the world, because there's so much cultures, there's a richness of stories. When Bukola talked about optioning a book or talking to a writer to create a story, there's so much stories that we can tell, and we can export our culture to a global audience. And I believe that one of the fastest vehicles to do that is the video gaming industry. So that being said, I want to thank everyone here on the panel. We're going to open up to some questions from the audience. Any questions, please? All right, let's go.
Good afternoon. My name is Adebinkpe Adebambo. So, question number one is there any plan by the big people like you in the gaming space to like enlightening people more? Because I know zilch about gaming, and I've always attached gaming to, well, I won't say jobless people, but there's also this talk of it's very addictive, this, as in that gaming thing, has never really, entered my head. So, me hearing it's used in education, is this, is that, and the whole thing you talked about, the Assassin's Creed, like learning a lot about culture. So I think a lot has to be done about sensitization, because also with every good thing, there's some bad things that could come with it, not all the time. Like what you mentioned about the Fortnite or Fortnite thing. There was even one time there was something about it on CNN, how maybe one 14-year-old boy committed suicide. Like all these things, or how you can make so much money and then it's also addictive. So I think if there is more sensitization or more, like enlightenment, then maybe people will be more like open to it. So if you already have something like that, can you, let us, we that don't know anything about gaming, and at least we want to just know a bit more, and how safe,
you know it is. Because some parents, when they hear the G of gaming, you ain't doing that, my boy or my girl.
Let me let Bukola go first, and then Oscar, you can say something as well.
Thank you. So I just want to just quickly deal with a misconception that that you are not sensitized does not mean your child is not playing. No. So that's the first thing to understand. Is that, and this is the barrier, is that, for instance, there are some words you say in a collection, like when you're in a group or in a community of teenagers, that they understand immediately. The adults in the room mostly don't understand what is being said. Like literally, it's like another language, right? So the first thing is that we're not trying to get the people who already play, do you understand, to play. The first thing we're trying to do is to ensure that they play age-appropriate games, right? And that we use the medium in a way that they can still have fun, but also learn. That's at a base level. So I'm saying that to say, in my opinion, our first job, or my first job, is to ensure that this child already spends this time, whether their parent knows it or they don't know it or, right? My first job is to the player, right? The other side will come, and we do a lot of work with schools and with parents and press releases. But the truth is, we all, it's like music. When the people start making crazy amounts from music now, with parents or football, it's the truth. Like I think it's important work. But what I'm saying is, when the economics makes sense, you put your child there and say, okay, make sure that my child does not do these other sides. Do you get what I'm saying? So I think for us as an industry, economics needs to be prioritized, but also education to people who already use the medium as a first level. There are other interactions with government, with parents, with media that will go on, but I'm just saying that the people at risk, if at all, which I don't think they're at risk, are the people who already are immersed in the medium. So that's, in my opinion, the first layer of work that we think needs to be done, personally speaking. And that's why a lot of the work we started off, our first 3 years in business were in schools. Parents were saying, my child doesn't play. The 10-year-old's favorite game is Grand Theft Auto. I'm like, what are we doing here? So this is why I'm saying, this is why my perspective is this. So sorry, Oscar, please go.
Just want to add to what she just said. I understand your concerns. My late mom, used to make this joke that if she had $1 for each time I played games, she would be a millionaire. And back then, gaming was frowned upon. I think now gaming is still frowned upon, but people are a little bit more open to their kids playing games. My journey into tech started from gaming. When I was playing games, gaming was frowned upon. When I went into tech, anyone that saw you with a laptop would look you funny. But now, almost every parent, after a couple of exits in Nigeria, almost every parent wants their kids to be in tech. Almost every parent wants their kids to either be a footballer. So like she said, the success part is very important. Even in the Nigerian music industry, there was a time in Nigeria that if you tell your parents you want to be a musician, they will look you funny. And I'm sure Dr. Sid can actually...
I will speak on that. I have some things to add as well. And,
No.
Okay. So let me just... last night, for some reason, I hadn't watched Gran Turismo. So I went and I watched Gran Turismo, the movie, and I suggest that you watch it as well. Gran Turismo is a perfect representation of what is happening and the education that needs to happen. And it was so weird that I watched it last night. My story as a musician, I went to medical school. The moment I told my father I was doing music, he kicked me out of the house. But when the narrative changed from Justice Esiri's son to Dr. Sid's father, he said, what's going on here? He had to change. Now, the education part, to be honest, and this is why I would say you can't put the education on other people. You have to be aware of what your child is doing, what is going on, and research. The interweb is a beautiful place with a lot of information that will give you everything. On our part, we're doing a lot to educate. A lot of people are starting in schools to at least give people education, control the exposure. But in terms of learning about gaming, gaming improves hand-eye coordination. It improves problem solving. It improves critical thinking. These are things that people won't necessarily associate with gaming. But I would recommend you watch that movie Gran Turismo. It is actually a true story about a video gamer who was playing sim racing. He was frowned upon by his father, who was a professional.
You're spoiling it.
Okay. Okay, no problem. I just want to help her because if you don't go watch out. But to be honest, I'm just saying there is a lot that, there are a lot of, like any industry, there are positives and there are negatives. But I think, it's like how there's parental guidance on your DSTV. It's a feature on the DSTV box. But the Nigerian Censorship Board will ban movies. And parents will complain about movies. You have the tools in your possession to control what your child sees, but you push it to someone else. I think as parents, we need to take more control. Study, understand. Like she says, the kids are already playing. So, my daughter plays Roblox. One day she asked me for £100 to buy Roblox coins. I said, £100 for what? I said, you know what? Pass your exams with all A's, I'll give you £100. So I tied her desire for Roblox coins to academic success. These things, because it's addictive, it gives you power to control the child in other ways to get what you want out of that child. It's a beautiful dynamic and it's a beautiful tool. If you see it the right way, you can literally use that to actually have a positive impact on your child. Hope we're good.
Just my final point is that
we also have some points that we want to make.
Final point, we'll take Ukemen and we'll come to Hugo.
Okay. I just want to say you should just talk to kids and look at the difference between kids who play games and kids who don't play games. Their tech savviness is night and day. You should just do it.
They've spoken a lot on the side, which you need to do. On our side, that's why we are here. I mean, we're in a film festival. We are here so that we can meet this audience and tell them what we do, what the industry really is like. And for us, Africa Communicate and other stakeholders here who have been involved, you notice we've been going for lots of events. Because traditionally, if we're even trying to reach out to you, the average Nigerian doesn't want to hear game, right? So now we're adopting strategies where we can come to you where you are, like a film festival, and discuss with you. So we're going for events, we're creating avenues, programs and all. We also have something we call the E-Africa Challenge we hold annually. It stands for Evolve Africa. And what we do there is we spotlight creators in the video games industry that use their works for social impact. Because there's an opportunity for social entrepreneurship there and an opportunity for driving social action as well. So there are people building games. There are games already out there that teach people about history. Songs of Africa. It's targeted at the diasporans. They learn about Africa's history, and their stipend is tied to the game. So the more you learn, the more badges you get, and then the more the children unlock the money they can spend. It's already automated. There are people that have built games that are talking about the air, the human air, the African air. There are people building games about climate change. So what we do at that event annually is we spotlight these actors to also educate the public that it's not just shooting and fighting every time. There are games for good, games for education. And we'll keep on coming to events like this. So if you have more events like this, invite everyone here so we can tell you what we're doing. Yes, you go.
No, I completely understand your question, and I empathize with you. So I think for me, in a couple of weeks' time, we're releasing a 70-page report on the Africa games industry. I mentioned that at the very beginning. That would cover everything from the value chain, so who are the key actors that go into like video game production, That would cover the skills required for video games. So most people think about video games as like a fun or playful like industry, but it actually requires quite a lot of like highly skilled individuals. That talks about some of the key markets that we can aspire to. So places like Brazil, Turkey, India. If I told you that the Brazilian games industry employs 12,000 people and generates $2 billion a year in revenue in Brazil, right? Then it starts to become a key player in terms of job creation and economic impact. Obviously, a lot of the report is going to cover what is happening within the continent and the history that the continent has had to date, as well as obviously surveying key actors within that. And that report is designed for key stakeholders. We designed it for the general public, so people like yourself who know nothing about the games industry and want to understand it. So we really intentionally considered, just the general public in it. We designed it for government, right, who are policymakers and thinking about how to grow the economy, because job creation is not just about, engineers and mechanical nurses and doctors and lawyers, right? The creative sector is wide. There's a lot of investment going into film, into music, into fashion, right? The games industry is global, $184 billion last year in revenue, right? So if it has the opportunity to create 20, 30,000 jobs, we can't say, oh, we cannot. These are well-paid jobs. And people who work in games include storytellers. So a lot of script writers can work in games. Audio, a lot of people who work in the music industry work in games, right? Bukola mentioned researchers, educational institutions, a lot of professors who have PhDs in specific topics can work in games, right? And then, we wrap it up by making recommendations. So we also made it for investors, both local and international. So local investors who want to invest in the video games don't understand it. We need to dumb it down for them. We need to explain how the video games industry works so that they can approach it intelligently and intentionally. And then finally, we've also created a document for ourselves, right? Who are the people who are in the games industry, just to understand, we're in our little silos, like in Lagos, in Abuja, in Kanu, but what else is happening? What's happening in Nairobi? What's happening in Kinshasa? What's happening in Johannesburg, right? As I mentioned earlier, I'm on the advisory board for Africa Games Week. At the end of this month, we would have around 1,000 people gathered in Cape Town, including a lot of internationals. There's a lot of investment that is going into video games. It's not just fintech. It's not just edutech, right? So we also need to present this as a viable option. Now that fintech is saturated, where else can we put money, right? We've tested our music, we've tested our film, we've tested our fashion. What is happening in the video game space? Because capital needs to be deployed to create value. So there are loads of people who've been really successful in articulating value propositions, creating products in music, right? Can they apply a lot of those knowledge and some of the profits that they've generated into creating a new industry? To Bukola's point, which I really like, right? The next generation, that next generation will all be playing video games. Have we prepared for the day of harvest? Did we plant seed, right, in preparation for what's about to happen? Or are we going to wait till we get there and realize that nobody invested in education, nobody invested in ecosystem development, nobody invested in studios, right? And now we're scrambling around. So that's the reason why we're here. I'm a big advocate. I've been to Abuja enough times. I've been to Abuja enough times in the past month, right, to ensure that our government understands we are number one in movies, we're number one in music. We cannot be number two in games.
Amen, amen, amen. I know we're running out of time. I know somebody else had a question. Let's take your question. Anybody else? We're going to take 3 questions very briefly because I know there's a next session that's loading up right now. Go ahead.
All right. Good morning. My name is Olayanju David Abayomi. I'm a filmmaker and stop motion animator. So my question is, gaming in Nigeria is already gaining ground and potentials of being a major pipeline in Africa. So I'm curious to know how it makes money. I know it's commercially viable, but unlike film and animation, which have showcase platforms like Netflix, Amazon, etc., I would like to know the process for gaming and also I want to know how you intend to commercialize gaming in Nigeria.
Eddie, you want to take that? Okay, can we have who? Yes, please.
Good day, everyone. So my name is Chiamaka Anago. I'm a lawyer. I work in sports and entertainment. So I have two questions. One can go to Oscar, and then the second one can go to anyone else. So the first one is, Oscar, I heard you say that the industry needs better structures. So can you particularize what these are? Are you talking about policies, or what do you mean by better structures? So the second one is, how do you think that market forces, i.e. what the gamers want, can inhibit cultural representation? So, thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, that's one more and that's it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tolu Ogungbadi. I'm an actor and a model. So basically, I just want to ask, because on the global stage, we see a lot of gamers being celebrated as professional athletes or professional virtual athletes. And these guys get to make a living and live fine off gaming. Now, is it possible in Nigeria or in Africa to be a gamer and make a living off it, or to be celebrated as a professional athlete or a professional virtual athlete? And how can you go about it? Are there communities, are there bodies, are there organizations that, I'm not just talking about online tournaments or gaming tournaments, like professionally, can you be celebrated as a gamer and make a living off it? I'm asking as a gamer now, because I want to go into it. Thank you.
Tola, you take the first question. Oscar, you've got one. Second question, Ukeme, you've got the third, and I'll take the fourth one.
Okay, so about your question was about monetization. How do you make money from games, right? Is that it? Okay, so basically, like I said, I've been making games for more than 10 years now, and not just making games, I publish and we actually earn from it. And aside from that, making our own personal games, we also make games for clients. So I'll start with that. You can make games for other people, so you can make money from that by making games for other people, so like as a service. So we do that as a service, but most importantly, we develop our own games and we publish it. So, and that can be monetized through different mediums. So you can start off by saying to take the whole weight off yourself. You can get a publisher, which, although it's difficult, much more difficult, but it's like the easiest route, like in terms of making money. So you can get a publisher, so you just make the game, you partner with the publisher, and then they pay you a certain amount depending on the metrics that you meet. Then also, which is like the most popular ways, it is through ads, and that's what we started off with, and that's like our biggest way of making money. You put ads in your games, the same way you put ads in YouTube videos, like you are familiar with that, everyone is from, like, and blogs too. So it's the same model. So an advertiser comes to Google, or maybe Unity or any ad provider, then they pay them to advertise in your own game. So you are the creator, then Google is the ad provider. So basically, then you publish your game. So you make money like with a split percentage. So you make money from that, or you can make money from in-app purchases, like in-game items, where you can, maybe you want to get ahead in the game, you buy coins, there are different stuff you can buy in the game, maybe skins, coins. So that's another form of making money. Then the most interesting one for me, which I think a lot of, like, Angry Birds did it, so it's branded content inside of games. So like maybe a power-up that is supposed to give you energy in a game, for instance, then you talk to an energy drink company to like brand that, so you put their logos and brandings inside of the game. So it's embedded, it's not disrupting anything in the game. So it's like a power-up you use in the game, then you already got paid for that, so you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, merchandising is, yeah, definitely. Merchandising is really cool. I'll go back to Angry Birds again. So Angry Birds, what they've been able to do successfully is transmedia, you understand? So aside from making money from their games, from their game characters, they've been able to like Okay, so they don't want to leave any money on the table. So they have books, they have a film, they have a film which is like very, very successful, the Angry Birds movie. And you can see also they have cartoon series on YouTube. I don't know if that is like monetized, but I know that they have a huge YouTube channel dedicated to that. Then merchandise, they have clothes. I think there's an Angry Bird Day in China. You understand? So that's huge. You understand? So we can. Of course, we are trying to like copy that and do it here, but it requires a lot of funding, like you said. And yeah, so in terms of platform, like you asked, so there are different platforms where you can put your games. So we started off with Google Play Store and App Store. Then we have platforms like Steam. We have several platforms, even Epic Store. And they have really good percentage, like in terms of the developer. You make a lot of more money on Epic Store. Like that's if you are doing like PC and console titles. Yeah, so the possibilities are endless, like when it comes to games. Yeah. You just need to ask, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. Before I answer it, I'll just take 1 minute quickly to say the money, just as it said, transmedia and all, is mainly moving away from the money you can get directly to IP, intellectual property. So if you're thinking of making money, think about IP, not what you get instantly. Now, to address your question, we are all here working towards building an industry, and no industry can grow on its own. The biggest issue we have in the video games industry is, number one, a bulk of the stakeholders within the industry are not business-oriented individuals. Yes, they are more creators than business people. So they are very passionate about building games, but making money from these games and scaling a studio, because making money is different from scaling completely. That's one big problem. The second thing is stakeholders that should work with these stakeholders to build an industry. Because an industry, just like if you take the film, for example, they are the producers, there's a complete association of distributors, there's a complete association of financiers, and their mode of business is different, but all coming together is what makes the film industry. So in the games industry, what we have currently is the game developers. And so we need those other stakeholders, people from the legal side, people from the finance side, from the government side. We need them to come together. And we're already doing a lot of work in that respect. One, trying to get our house in order, form like a kind of association or body, so that even in terms of engagement, how much do you charge, what training opportunities are there, we are setting up those structures. He has a training program, I have a training program, she has a training program, and we are building the workforce for tomorrow. On the legal side, at our just concluded Gamerton, we had a visit to Banwa and Igodalo, and we had a full legal workshop, and it was mind-opening, because we need them. But traditionally, a creator, a game developer would not go out. He just wants to build game and make money instant. But now we are thinking long-term. On the government side, they had meetings with the federal government just recently. And there's now a strategy in place. He has done a lot of work with respect to that, as her as well and the rest of us. And they have a structure in place to include game development, to create policies around game development. So those are the kind of structures we need, and it's ongoing. Yeah.
Okay. Your question was around how market forces can inhibit the growth of the industry. Cultural representation. Okay. I think that would happen if what people who are actually touting cultural representation are providing doesn't fit with what the users actually or the consumers actually want. But from what we've seen historically, Africans are really, really Africans. Like, we love our content, we love our music, we love our art, we love our films. So I don't really see a problem there. I actually see it as a positive, because growing up on the radio, you usually hear 50 Cent and a lot of foreign music. These days, you barely hear foreign music. Everyone is watching Nigerian movies these days. So I think the market forces would always be in our favor. What we actually have to do is how we can align with the market forces by providing the consumers what they want. If they're interested in a certain type of games, we provide those games, and then we can actually sprinkle our representation and African culture around it.
Awesome, amazing. And then for the professional gamer side, so my startup Contender is an esports platform, and what it does is We host and organize esports tournaments, and we support tournament organizers with hosting their own tournaments. Now we have 2 editions. The third one is coming up in December. We also fostered the creation of esports teams. So the problem we've had in the past was we had a lot of players who play for teams, but there was no, it's like having Manchester United without the Premier League. You have teams, you have players, but there are no leagues or tournaments that generate enough revenue for these people to get paid and for the team owners to get paid and to in turn pay the players. So what we're doing at Contender is creating that ecosystem and that framework where we create premium high-level tournaments with prize pools that can enable gamers earn from their passion. I think over the last 2 years, we have paid out over 56 million naira in prize money. Our first event in 2021, the prize pool was 20 million. We did over 17 million throughout 2022. Our event in the end of the year was 10 million naira. We have another heavy prize pool. If anybody wants to give us cash, we'll collect in December. So there are opportunities. There are other platforms. There's also Gamer. There is 1080 Play. These are platforms that are creating league and tournament opportunities for individual gamers and teams to be able to earn from their passion. One of the players who won our first edition of the Contender FIFA tournament. Now he's in Canada and he's also getting celebrated. We've had players who have traveled, winning different tournaments in Nigeria, gone to Dubai, gone to Indonesia, gone to Bali to represent Nigeria in different gaming tournaments in South Africa. So there are opportunities and there are different platforms that give you the ability to earn from your passion. You know, if you, after this, the panel was done, I can sit down and have a conversation with you one-on-one and we can discuss that. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we have exceeded our time. We can't take any more questions, but I'm sure some of us will be available to answer one-on-one questions if you have any after the panel. I want to say big thank you to everyone on this stage for coming and giving us your time to discuss this. And thank you to everyone in the audience who couldn't have done this without you. Big shout out to Afri for putting this together. My name still remains Dr. Zid, and I am on this stage, and I thank you all. This has been the panel on cultural representation in video gaming. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sid. Can I just have you all wait for a picture? And then if you don't mind, before you leave, just do a quick interview outside with the cameras. Thank you all for participating. We'll have cocktails outside, and then our next panel starts at 2 p.m. So we'll be back in by 2. So thank you. And if you want to talk to the panelists, please meet them